The philosophy of bass playing has changed quite a bit since I've been teaching. It used to be that you would try to recruit bass players that, number one, had access to a minivan, and number two, was over 6 feet tall at the age of 10. And so the people that you're competing for string bass are also going to be competing for spots as center on the school football team. But now we've sort of opened it up to different people who can play the bass that aren't necessarily gigantic. We've got boys and girls and other people playing the bass as well. And there are definitely ways to accommodate all these people. There certainly are fractional size basses, but let's say you're going to a contest or going on a trip or something, they have to be able to get those basses around. And if they're not, gigantic people that are very strong, they might struggle with that, and then all of a sudden that becomes your responsibility. And you got to lug that bass around, and you basically become a bass Sherpa for the duration of the trip. So what you're going to want to have to do is make sure that the students are set up to where they can get their own basses around easily without, breaking their backs. And there's some tools out there for those students that are smaller to be able to do that. The first item is, it's called a bass buggy. You can get these for about $130, and they're really easy to put on. The first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to adjust the straps so that the bungee cord thing at the top is just below the upper bout. If you get it too tall or too narrow, it doesn't stay on quite as well. But you just attach it to the end pin and you pull it up. You wrap the bungee cord around and you just lock it in place, and it's good to go, and you can roll it around, and it's really easy to get around now with your bass. You can do this with your bass in a case. You can do this with your bass without a case. Like if you're at a contest and you're going from the stage to the sight reading room, have your bass players strap on their bass buggies and they're good to go. I like this a lot better than the end pin wheels. Sometimes they'll slip depending on the mechanism itself. If you don't have a removable end pin, you've got one that has its own screw system, and that may or may not be functional. You might hit a certain tile or a certain type of floor or a bump or something, and then the wheel goes sideways, and then that's not going to work anymore. If you get a completely removable end pin wheel, sometimes if it for some reason doesn't tighten enough, and again, you hit a bump and then the wheel's out of position or the wheel's going all over the place. I like the bass buggy a lot better, and it's a little pricey at $130, but hey, it's going to save you a lot of hassle over the long run. Bow quivers are pretty handy too. If you get a bow quiver for a bass, it allows them to have an extra free hand so that they can hold their music or their stool, or their music and their stool and their offhand. And not their music, their stool, and their bow. So some students will put their bow like in their, they'll slide it down in the tailpiece section, which I don't really like, or they'll, put it in their strings and, just to secure it there. I don't terribly like that they do that. I don't think it's that great for their bass. And I think most luthiers would probably agree with me. But, the bass quiver kind of solves that problem. So, just strap on a bass quiver. Again, they're not that expensive. You can just get those, tie them up to your basses, no problem. I teach bass from a seated position in our orchestras. If you teach bass standing up, good for you. I'm not going to argue with you. But if you're taking bassists to contests and they're used to playing with stools, and then they say, well, I don't want to lug around my stool to this contest, so I'm just going to stand up for this contest, and they're not used to doing it, well, that's not going to be optimal. And if you've got those gigantic wooden stools, those can be tough to lug around. So you might want to look into getting some collapsible, adjustable stools. If you get a good one, again, these aren't cheap either. They can be upwards of $170 per stool, but you can set the height exactly the way you want it. Make sure your students are comfortable, and some of them are made out of aluminum instead of steel, so you can transport them around. They're a lot lighter. You can hold one of those in a bow, no problem. And if you've got a bass buggy, you can get those and wheel the bass and get all the other stuff from various parts of the contest location without needing any help from you or from other people. There's been years where I've had those big wooden stools, and it's like I've been carrying like 4 of them at a time, and I look like, kind of Donkey Kong about to throw barrels at Mario as I'm going to the sight reading room, and that's not a good look. So get a collapsible stool. Get a lot of them. Get one for each of your bass players at least. Remember that the neck is probably the most vulnerable part of the bass. So whenever you're transporting that bass around on the bass buggy, it can stand up, but you don't want it to stand up like that if it gets knocked down and it falls backwards on the neck. And this is the same with cellos and cello cases, those fiberglass cello cases with the wheels. If they fall down, they're not designed to take a drop like that. And there's about a 50% chance that it's going to snap the neck in half if it takes a drop like that. So don't do that. Also consider the way you load your basses on the school bus. Make sure that it's not in a position where it's taking pressure on the neck. Some people lay them flat across the seats, and the problem with that is, you take a turn and it's putting pressure on the neck as you do that. The best way to do it is, to put it straight up and down in the seat, just like as a person would sit on the bus, and secure it that way. You can have your bass player sit next to their basses, and that's going to be a lot safer for your basses. I'm not a bass player, but I've learned how to teach bass and manage basses over the years. So if you're a bass player and you're an expert on how to navigate through basses and taking your school basses to contests, and you've got something to share, please drop a comment in the comment section below. Thanks for watching this video, and we'll see you in the next one.